And one little addendum on children things. There is if you want to go, there's a TV downstairs that broadcasts this, so you can watch downstairs. I love that thing you were saying about you can always start again. That always reminds me of that phrase. It's never too late to become the person that you might have been, which I always think is so encouraging. It's never too late to become the person you might have been. Okay. That's by the by. So this is the third in a series that we're doing on the subject of joy. And in the first week, this is like previously on, in the first week we spoke of the importance of revealing the entrance to the well of joy. This is sort of well of joy within us, I always think, and you have to find that well of joy. And the first thing you have to do is to find the entrance to the well of joy. And within that, it's the importance of not being selective about the feelings that we want to have and the feelings we don't want to have. That is the entrance to the well of joy. When we're selective about what we're willing to experience, the focus is of our attention lies in working out what we want to feel and what we don't want to feel, and steering our lives towards circumstances that give us the feelings that we want to have. It leads us to keeping an overview of the weather generated by those circumstances and trying to get towards sunny climes. But the problem with that is it takes us away from what we're feeling right now. If you're always trying to feel something else, you're not going to be feeling what you feel right now. And when you don't discriminate between what you like feeling and what you don't like feeling, we choose to feel what we're feeling in the present moment. And funnily enough, choosing to feel what we feel in the present moment is the entrance, the portal to the well of joy. And the moment you do that, you start just to get a sense of that joy. And then once you enter into that feeling, we then descend within ourselves into that well of joy. And the next stage, I said, was we put our attention on our non-being. To enter into non-being is to allow ourselves to become detached from all the notions of being and arrive within ourselves at a space where we witness that being, that which within us is before the Big Bang that is our daily experience. If you think of all our daily experiences as being the Big Bang, this is just before that. We go to a place within ourselves from which the experiences that we have is generated, and that which gives us the capacity to experience. And then last week we looked at, once you've done that, once you've actually made that ability to choose what you're feeling, then in terms of joy, you go out to connect. We move from the preoccupations of ourselves, our involvement with our thoughts and our feelings, with our problems, with our lacks, with the things that we think about. We go out from there to connect with that which is all around us. And we spoke last week about the fact that joy is a function of connection, whether it be another person, a work of art, music, whatever it is, joy is a function of connection. It comes from the realization that we're not separate, but we are connected. And it's that premonition of the bliss that comes when we experience, that joy we experience in that connection is a premonition of the bliss that we experience in what's called unity of consciousness, when we find that we're not only connected, but we're actually one with all of creation. We're a part of a greater consciousness. And we then have to be intentional about our connection, being intentional about our acceptance of our feelings, of being with that non-being and coming out of connecting. And that's how we get to joy. And if you want to know anything, listen to or watch any of those previous ones, the little red card on the chairs in front of you will tell you how to do that. And if you want to be on our mailing list, the blue card on the chair in front of you can just fill that in and put it in the plate or give it to me or whatever. So Tom read those readings from the Dhammapada, talking about the act of living in joy. And I want to talk about what it means, how we actually live in joy in our lives. Following a path that leads to joy. Because joy is a sure sign that we're on the right path. To be united with God in love is to know the true joy that's at the center of all life. And that's really what we're here to experience. You know, going into good old Christian theology, if you look really, you know, the second coming is really a full experience of joy. You know, in the hymns it says, you know, lo, he comes in clouds descending for the whole second coming, to which I would say, no, he doesn't. You know, it's not about that. David Walcott puts it in his fantastic poem, Love After Love. He says, David Walcott says, the time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit, eat. You'll love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. This describes what it is to live in joy when you greet yourself arriving, when you suddenly find that which you were looking for all the time is within yourself, when you connect directly and feel that joy within you, when you greet yourself arriving, that reunion and connection that we spoke about last week, and that other word for joy that he uses, elation. That is the fullness of joy that Jesus was speaking about. Jesus says, I have told you this, all the stuff he's been saying, so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. That my joy may be in you and your joy may complete. And we get a hint of that joy in peak experience like samadhi and enlightenment. All those touches with the divine release joy. And the joy we feel in day-to-day life is really just a taster to that fundamental joy that is within us. You know, that Christmas carol, joy to the world, the Lord is come. When it's all over, when everything is done, joy is at the center. In fact, Shakespeare said, what's done is done. The joy is in the doing. And at the center of that eternal now, that sacred time, that present moment, that portal is joy. If we could but touch it, because as Julian of Norwich says, all shall be well and all manner of things shall be well. Because fundamentally, the universe is a friendly place. Because we are connected through our consciousness and there is an order in that connectivity. That's sort of, how it works. And that knowledge of that centeredness that we have produces joy, and that joy is infectious. And once realized, it can be spread around. Last week, we talked about the need for attention in experiencing joy, to have one's attention on one's feelings, on being within ourselves. And Manoray talked about focusing on our breath and reminded us that when we put our attention on our breath, we connect with ourselves in a deep way. But I think joy also requires an attitude to have joy. And that attitude is what the Dhammapada is talking about, that whole Buddhist whole phrase of thing. It's the attitude of joy that we have to adopt. When it says, live in joy, in love, even among those who hate. We retain our loving connection by giving and our definition here of love is giving with no expectation of return. You give with no expectation of return. That's love. So we retain our connection even among those who hate. We hold them in love. That is a step, an attitude to joy. Live in joy, in health, even among those afflicted. To live in joy, even among the afflicted. And I'm reminded of Mother Teresa, that joy in her face, living amongst the afflicted. Live in joy, in peace, even among the troubled. To live in joy among the troubled. I'm reminded of Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. Live in joy without possessions like the shining ones. We think of those who've renounced wealth for the spiritual path and that shining that is there in them. The winner sows hatred because the loser suffers. Let go of winning and losing and find joy. That joy of non-competing. The joy when you're just okay, connected to yourself and connected to what is going on. And you're not competing. You're just being with what is happening. There is no fire like compassion, no crime like hatred, no sorrow like separation, no sickness like hunger, no joy like the joy of freedom. And we do think of those who are unfree, who are hungry, and who feel themselves as being separate. Health, contentment, and trust are the greatest possessions. And freedom, your greatest joy. We just think how fortunate we are living here when we look out at the world. Look within, be still, free from fear and attachment. Know the sweet joy of the way. How joyful to look upon the awakened and to keep company with the wise. How long the road to the man who travels with a fool. But whoever follows those who follow the way discovers his family and is filled with joy. Follow then, it says, the shining ones, the wise, the awakened, the loving, for they know how to work and forbear. Follow them as the moon follows the path of the stars. The whole thing is an exhortation to follow the spiritual path, which is the path of the way of joy. You know, the following of the spiritual path is the following of the way of joy. It is the purpose of the spiritual path that we talked about last week. The spiritual path is the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. The cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. And this really is the path of joy. And the Buddha suggests we take that path. I love that bit where it says, how long is the road to a man who travels with a fool? It's just so, you just feel that. When you're traveling with, we're all traveling with fools at the moment. But whoever follows those who follow the way discovers his family and is filled with joy. Both the idea of traveling with a fool and that when you follow the way, you discover your family. And Jesus makes that point. There's one point in the New Testament where he's told, your mother and father, your mother's outside. And it says, while Jesus was talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside waiting to speak to him. Someone said to him, your mother and brothers are outside waiting to speak to you. He replied to them, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother, my sister, and my mother. It's amazing how closely the spiritual passages from different traditions follow each other. The idea of the family. You're finding your family when you follow the path. I felt so privileged in that the path that I've taken, has enabled me to follow the shining ones and to focus on spirituality being at the center of my life. That's what I'm paid to do, which is a fantastic thing to experience. I mentioned that the discovery's joy is just not about attention, it's about attitude. And really, this whole thing about joy is the question of prioritizing the spiritual life above all other things. It is the prioritization of the spiritual life. To seek the deepest truth and not to be distracted. Quite often, the trouble is the spiritual path it becomes a backdrop to one's life, like going to yoga or, it is part of nowadays the well-worn path. It's part of the broad way as opposed to narrow way. We say we're spiritual but not religious nowadays, But we like to be entertained. I often say my greatest fear is that what I'm doing up here is spiritual stand-up. And, coming along, I'm doing my spiritual stand-up. That's great. Fantastic, I always tell the story, when I was once in a Christmas Eve service and... I was standing at the door. It was my vicar who was there, the priest who was there, and he'd done this very moving service. And I was standing with him at the door, and this bloke came along, and he was in floods of tears. Christmas Eve, he said, "That's the most moving, amazing thing I've ever seen." He said, "Anyway, see you next year." That's what it's like. It's like, okay, that was great, but I'll see you next year. Living in joy is a function of making that path your priority. It's about, meditation, books, talks, inquiry, prayer, the scriptures, and an expectant attitude that we're being led day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment. It's an attitude that we have to take because that is the truth of it. The universe is calling to us all the time. All the time, the universe is saying, come, know yourself. And, either you get it or you don't, but it's being called upon. And the truth is, when you make it the priority, you begin to hear books appear, things happen. It becomes an unfolding path, and suddenly you begin to experience joy. We have to realize that we are part of a great unfolding vision, which we call the evolution of consciousness. We're part of an unfolding vision, which is the evolution of consciousness. And that it's not just a backdrop or something that makes us feel better or nice to have or a compass to help us navigate to the next treat in life, or the next relationship, or some more money, or health, or happiness, or being part of a great team, or whatever it is. No, the path unfolds in front of us. And sometimes it feels not good. And it's okay for it to feel not good. And sometimes it feels good, and it's okay to feel good. But if we're willing to have it all, then we're on that path. It doesn't come from our minds or by our careful planning. The Tao Te Ching says, a good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent upon arriving. A good artist lets his intuition lead him wherever it wants. A good scientist has freed herself of concepts and keeps her mind open to what is. Thus, the master is available to all people and doesn't reject anyone. She is ready to use all situations and doesn't waste anything. This is called embodying the light. That's Taoist, and the shining ones is what the Buddhists refer to it, that idea again. And it's that attitude that everything is part of a great unfolding, and that our task and the little crumbs that have been left is joy. Hansel and Gretel leaving the crumbs out of the fire. The little crumbs are the little bits of joy that we experience. The attitude of it's part of that greater, and our task is to follow that path that's at the center of what it means to live in joy. We accept our thoughts and feelings. We don't discriminate them as good or bad. We identify before the Big Bang. We identify with non-being, the capacity to be rather than the roller coaster of being. And from that still place, as Eliot said, in the turning world, we look out and make connection with the world from a disinterested perspective. Tao Te Ching says, let go of winning and losing and find joy. And we commit ourselves to that connection to all moments of life, not turning it on or off, but having it be the very purpose of life, not being concerned about the outcome. And if that seems hard, well, the news is that the spiritual path is not for pussies. It is hard. It's fundamentally about going against the grain, against the tide of accepted wisdom and the deep eternal nature of that wisdom as it unfolds in front of us. So this is all really a plea. To live in joy, you have to prioritize your spiritual life, to make sure you've got a practice. And if you haven't, develop one. And if you've got one, develop it further. Have an attitude that's non-judgmental and open. Live in joy, in health, even among the afflicted. Just to sum up a little bit, live in joy, in peace, without possessions like the shining ones. Let go of winning and losing and find joy. Look within, be still, free from fear and attachment. Know the sweet joy of the way and follow the shining ones, the wise, the awakened, the loving, for they know how to work and forbear. Follow them as the moon follows the path of the stars. Okay, so we always have an opportunity to actually come back at me or Heather and either let us know how wrong we are about what we're doing, or, we offer these information with the willingness to be wrong. And either your experience of what you've just been doing, or any thoughts you have about what we've been talking about of joy, or any thoughts about anything else that you might have. Sometimes we have a nice silence when we're doing this, and that's perfectly okay as well. So I'm just going to say, does anybody feel they'd like to say anything at all? Yes, Mark.
I talked about joy and happiness with a fellow I was riding with yesterday, an old friend from years ago that's originally from Holland. And he wanted to avoid these puddles. And I said, oh, puddles. And I rode through these 6-inch puddles that were about the length of the chapel here with mud in the bottom. And it was like, yeah!
I didn't quite get that. He was avoiding what?
We were on mountain bikes.
Oh, you're on mountain bikes, right.
And just ran through those puddles.
Oh, through the puddles.
It comes up and wets you in the back, and your legs get sprayed, and it's hot out.
Fantastic, thank you. That's great. Anybody else like to say anything at all? Yes, fantastic. Just say your name so everybody knows because you're here.
My name's Stuart Walton, and I was reflecting on what you said last week about joy being the sort of source for all, connection.
Yeah.
And how important it is for you to feel all the other emotions in order to really feel joy. I mentioned it to someone who's kind of a mentor to me, and he came up with he shared a quote back that I'd like to share, which is, joy is the matriarch of all emotions, and unless all of her children are present, are welcome, she will not be present. And I just thought that was such a perfect encapsulation of the message that you shared last week, and I found it to be worth sharing today.
Thank you. That was absolutely lovely. I love that. Joy is the matriarch of all emotions, and unless all children are there, then the matriarch will not appear. That's lovely. I love that. Thank you. Anybody else like to share anything? Yes, Monterey.
It's very interesting to feel joy, and I even call my work the joy of movement.
Yeah.
And then when you're on the other side of the joy, which I happen to be right now because I was watching television yesterday, and there was this little 10-year-old boy who was starving, and they actually shot and killed him right after he was on the television. And it made me feel so much pain for what goes on in the world, how it's hard to then bring myself back into that place of joy, but I can find the joy somehow.
Yes, it is, there is so much pain in the world, and we have to have that pain as well for all the children to be present, funnily enough. You have to have that pain, and it is so difficult to watch things like that. Absolutely. Yeah. Tom, and then Kelly.
It's listening to this and reflecting on some of the last couple of weeks, it's not easy actually to come to terms with the fact that I was actually raised with a really narrow sense of joy, that there was winning and losing actually, and that I would think of, and I've shared this with you before, entering a pre-existing rhythm of perfection, which is a very elusive place and takes a lot of conditions to get to that place. And yet, I've also had a powerful philosophy around creating options, creating choices, creating not being stuck in one place. And your metaphor of being at the sort of the edge of the well of joy and having choices of how to interpret that place that you enter, and being willing to encompass a broader swath or a range or frequency of emotions and conditions, and still have the option of having perhaps joy when I wouldn't normally think of it, is on the one hand empowering, the other hand almost scary is not the right word, but I've realized that a lot of my life has been so narrow in terms of option creation. And this is a different way of looking at it, which is empowering and humbling in a good way. So, thank you.
Thank you.
It's interesting that word perfect that you use, perfection.
Entering the pre-existing rhythm, searching for a pre-existing rhythm of perfection, which I've experienced in skiing, which I've experienced in other contexts, but there's a lot of conditions that have to be in place to experience that pre-existing rhythm of perfection. And I've had another metaphor that Anna has never liked, and I see why, is that the rainbow is always there, never here, was always taking me in a yearning way toward something that is always elusive.
Yeah. It's interesting, the word, in the Bible, for example, the word perfect, Jesus at one point says, be perfect like your heavenly Father is perfect. The word actually that is at the center of the word perfect is the word, what it actually comes from is the word that means complete or whole. We take perfect as being without fault, but the true etymology of the word perfect is to include all things, to be whole and to be complete. And I think that's an interesting thing. Kelly, do you want to hold the microphone, Anna, for Kelly so she can carry on feeding? That's great. We love it. No, we love it.
Thank you. Something that you said last week, Nicholas, that really resonated with me is that this idea of connection and joy and connection isn't limited to just connecting with other people, that you can find connection with nature or art. And this idea of just connecting with something outside yourself really resonated with me. And sometimes I find if I am feeling lonely or can't connect with people, if I go to connect with nature first, it enhances my connection with people. Or if I'm feeling really connected to people and I go to nature or art, it enhances that connection as well. So, so often I think we think of connection as really just being human to human, but it's so much more than that. And I sometimes think equally powerful the connection you find in nature. Just make that going outward. I loved that. So thank you. I just wanted to bring that up for anybody who missed that the connection isn't limited to people.
Thank you, Kelly. So appreciate that. Anybody else like to say anything? Yes. Claire.
I'm Claire. I guess a thought that's been on my mind a lot lately has been sort of, for lack of a better term, my obligation to cultivate joy because of my privilege. I feel really hyper aware lately of the great privilege and abundance that surrounds me in my day-to-day life. And if you're like me and you believe that all things are connected, in a sense, because of the abundance and privilege that I have, I almost have a deeper social, global, collective obligation to be more in a place of joy. And so not to have toxic positivity or be disingenuine, but in a sense just to be mindful that I have such greater access to that because of my privilege.
Yeah, I think that's true. And next week I'm going to be talking about spreading joy, because I think that is something that we have it is our duty to communicate that joy. It is a function of understanding. And I really appreciate you mentioning that, so thank you. Anybody else like to chip in? Yes, Maureen.
Thank you. Every week has just been so enlightening. And I just have a couple comments, because everyone's comments today have been so inspiring. And I went to a funeral a couple weeks ago for a very beloved person here in Aspen, and I saw some people I know there. But anyway, he operated on these principles called the Optimist Creed, and they shared it on his obituary. And it was these 9 things of, it starts with this unshakable foundation in yourself and belief in yourself, and I can't remember them all, but I should. Anyway, I just thought that it was very powerful, but that's, that again is a discipline and a willpower initiative, I guess. But what I was really reflecting on this morning is what I'm finding out is this difference between happiness and joy. And happiness, yeah, sure, I'll take another $1 million. Oh, yeah, I know I could be happier. And then I could buy this and I could buy that. And gosh, you get the new car or the bracelet or the whatever, even the trip. And it's wonderful and it's short-lived. But the joy, finding that distinction, that peace that you get. I mean, when we did our walk, and I walked outside and looked at the mountains and thought, oh my gosh, I'm so grounded. So all the other things that might be distracting or disturbing, or these horrific images we see around the world that just rock us and so forth, but that difference between happiness and, striving for that, and like you're saying, feel the feeling you're feeling. And when you feel the feeling you're feeling, then you let go of all the stress, the pressures, the worries, the burdens, even the happinesses. And then that kind of, pervasive peacefulness comes in. And that's the joy that no one can rob you of. And then it takes me full circle back to his Optimist Creed and thinking, yeah, he built that. But to me, it's very powerful, because it says, regardless of what's happening around you, or material wealth, or the sadness in the world, you can find that joy.
Thank you, Maureen. That's great. Very quickly, sir, I've overrun a bit.
Go ahead.
No, Kathleen, no, you're here. You've got the microphone.
I was just going to speak to the immediate exercise that you have given us, to stand up and walk around. And what I noticed that I love being alone, and I love going in. Yeah. And the flow, the river of human beings are so beautiful, but it's bumpy. Yeah. As long as I kind of like walking around each other, it was, and how do we do that? I mean, this is a perfect exercise, right? Because we're in a safe place. We are all here for some sort of a similar reason. And you can still feel our bumpiness. Yes. So we're talking about the wider world. So anyway.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yes, that was the idea of the thing, in that there is that bumpiness. But if you center yourself in your breath, if you center yourself in your being, then you actually become the smooth aspect, and you can negotiate your way around that bumpiness through the smoothness that you're feeling. So thank you for that. That was the idea. Thank you.